bring to you today Dr. David Stovall from UIC. Dr. David Stovall comes from Chicago, grew up in Chicago, lives in Chicago, is a professor in Chicago, and understands all things related to us, our needs, our spaces, and that kind of thing, right? And so, he will be talking with you about the rights to the streets of Memphis. I know that's what you all are working on, but he's gonna go deeper than simply talking to you about a story. He will be working with you this morning to connect the story to your lives as individuals, as well as to the things that are happening inside of our city and inside of the United States and globally. He can do it way better than what I'm trying to do right now, okay? I will leave it to him. Welcome, Dr. Stovall.
What's happening, y'all? Everybody all right? Yeah. All right. Good to see y'all. Again, my name is Dave Stovall. I am a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I've been over there 19 years. I actually am in two departments. So I'm in the Department of African American Studies, and I'm also in the Department of Criminology, Law, and Justice. Now, what I want to do today is a couple of things. One is to give you all some notes for what you all have been reading in terms of the rights of the streets to Memphis. The other thing is to talk about a couple of things that you all know, I would argue, a little bit better than my college students. And I say that because you all are experiencing it in a particular way. Now, first thing that I want to do, I didn't do this with first period, but for you all, one of the things I want to do, so right now, in your, either on your notes or someplace else, write a question that you all have about rights in the streets of Memphis. Doesn't have to be a long question. Give yourself, let's take about a minute to just write a question. All right, well let me go into this real quick. Now, one of the things, being a professor over at UIC, I've been working with these folks around this, and sometimes I get a chance to work with psychologists and I also get a chance to work with medical doctors. So when you all hear the word psychologist, what comes to mind? What do psychologists do? Yep.
I think they analyze the behavior of people and why they do things they do.
That is exactly what they do. They analyze the behavior of people and ask questions as to why they do things. Now, there's another thing that is important, and please put this in your notes. The word trauma.
You said what?
Trauma. Yep. Now, are people familiar with this word?
Yes.
Right? Now, when someone is traumatized, right? So if someone is traumatized, what's happening to them? Yes, sir.
They are mentally like being eaten away from that certain thing that's bothering them constantly.
Right. So they are having something happen to them that's long term. A lot of times what doctors refer to it as is a longitudinal situation, right? Meaning that it just happens over time, it happens for a long period of time. Now, for your notes, trauma is defined by psychologists and doctors as an injury from a situation that you had no control over. So now let's think about that. Right, I'll say it again. It's an injury from a situation that you have no control over. Now, if we think about the rights to the streets of Memphis, what was the main character's trauma? Yes, sir. Right, when he got jumped. So when he was in a situation that he had no control over, and he actually experienced an injury from it, right? Now, this thing around trauma, it happens in a number of different ways. So now you can have this thing where it's something that's a physical harm to your body, or you can have something else. How many people have ever heard of the term fight or flight? Now, when you think about fight or flight, what happens in that? No?
So if you fight, you're trying to fight the whatever trying to attack someone, the bus was coming, and the flight response is to run. The fight response would be like, I'm going to hit by the bus.
It's an important piece. So this thing around, that's exactly right. And this is actually for your notes. Fight or flight. Two different responses. Both are about survival. And it's an instant response. So this is often this is the ways in which people can decide to survive. Right? And now, just like it was said, you could be in a fighting situation where you decide that you can actually confront someone who's attacking you, or you can run from that attacker. So now this thing becomes important because what response did the main character in Rice in the Streets of Memphis have? Huh? The first one was flight. Was fight. So now here's the thing, and this is also for your notes. The first response by the main character was a flight response. The second response was a fighting response. So now we have this conversation around trauma. There's always these things that come up, and in particular traumas that we have experienced that we don't talk about as much. Now, I gotta admit to y'all, I'm a little bit older, but I do not want to become that old dude who's looking at y'all as young folks and saying, what's wrong with y'all? Back in my day, we used to do that. Anybody got people like that? That you experience? What's wrong? What y'all doing? I'm not trying to be that dude. But the thing that I actually do want to pay attention to is there are situations that now we have to pay attention to at a very different level, and Rice to the Streets to Memphis now allows us to pay attention in a particular way. Now, one of the things that we do at the college level is we ask this question around trauma, but there are different types of trauma. One type of trauma, and this is also for your notes, is complex trauma. Right? That means that the trauma that you're experiencing is affecting you in different ways. And now, when you think about Rice in the Streets of Memphis, there were these complex traumas that the main character was experiencing. Now, we talked about the fight or flight experience. What else were some of the traumas that he was experiencing?
When his father left.
When his father left. What else? When he went hungry, right? So these two things around his father leaving and him being hungry are examples of complex trauma. And now, doctors often talk about this in particular ways. Many times, you can have an injury that is unseen. You can have an injury that you don't know has happened for a long period of time. Sometimes it's short, but sometimes it's long periods of time. And sometimes our brain will forget that injury unless it's triggered by something. So I just gave an example last period. When I was younger, one of my guys was shot. And he ran all the way home. And we looked at his shirt and saw that he was shot. He had no clue. He just heard the bullets, we all ran, he got to the spot, and then he sees the blood. And we still talk about that to this day. He was like, man, if y'all would have told me, who knows how long I could have gone like that. So now, if I'm thinking about this in a particular way, there's something happening here in Chicago right now. And I was telling this to last period. There's a trial of a man named Jason Van Dyke. Jason Van Dyke is accused of what they call murder in the first degree for firing 16 shots into a young person by the name of Laquan McDonald. Now, when we think about the trauma, and something I also said to first period, my brother-in-law went to school with Jason Van Dyke. When he saw the videotape, the first thing he said was, that looks like Jason Van Dyke. And I'm sitting next to him like, what? He said, yeah, man, I went to school with that dude. And as soon as we listened to the report more, they said his name, Jason Van Dyke. The second thing he said was, yeah, from what I remember from Jason Van Dyke, he looks like somebody he would be somebody that I would think to do something like that. Right? So he was talking, what he saw, he actually knew from Jason Van Dyke when they were in grade school. They went 6th grade together. They went from 6th grade all the way to, and they graduated together. And he said, they graduated 8th grade and they graduated high school together. He said, yeah, that looks like something you do. So now, if we think about, there were 2 witnesses to what happened to Laquan McDonald. Now, the question that I have for you all is, what was their trauma? The 2 witnesses. Mm-hmm.
Seeing, what's his name?
Laquan McDonald.
Laquan McDonald being shot by Jason Van Dyke.
Right? So on the witness stand, one of those witnesses said, every night since it happened 4 years ago, I still see it. He says he goes to bed every night and he still sees this thing. Right? So now when we think about what does that do to a person? So now we have the event of the death, but we also have this thing around trauma, and trauma can affect a lot of different people in different ways. Now, this thing around the main character in Streets of Memphis experiencing this complex trauma, now I'm going to pivot a little bit. When we think about, when you all see the term justice, what comes to mind? The right thing. That's an important piece. What else when we see the term justice? Because you're making a really important point. So when we think about justice, what else comes to mind? Mm-hmm. A villain. This is an important piece. And this is important for your notes. If we are talking about justice, then there has to be an injustice. And I'll say it again. If we are talking about justice, there has to be an injustice. So something has happened that has had a negative effect on some person or people. And now, when we think about that in particular ways, it comes up differently. Now, one thing that comes up, and I think this becomes important for you all in terms of, and this is me asking you all this question, what would be some examples of an injustice? Something that's happening that you may feel to be wrong to somebody or a group of people. All the way in the back. Bullying. Go a little bit further. Somebody getting jumped? Yeah. So this thing around how we understand that, or people feeling as if they need to enact power over people. Now, let's go with that. What are other ways that people enact power over people? Abuse. And a different type of abuses. Abuses can be complex. So now, let's think about this in terms of money. And I asked the group last period about this. How much does LeBron James make for the Los Angeles Lakers? A year. Yes, sir.
It's $34 million a year.
Yep. So $34 million a year, LeBron James makes. Now, he is employed by who?
Lakers.
The Los Angeles Lakers. How much is the Los Angeles Lakers worth as a franchise? Now, they pay LeBron James almost $35 million a year. How much are they worth? Right? Not just $1 billion, $10 billion. So remember, there has to be some money to pay LeBron James without them going broke. And in fact, the Los Angeles Lakers just signed a $200 billion contract with Comcast to advertise all of their games. Billion. Right. Now, let's put this in broader context. There are 7.5, almost 7.2 billion people on the planet. Right? So 7.2 billion people on the planet, split that in half, you got about 3.65 billion people. Now, what if I told you that 8 people have as much money as half the planet? But here's the thing. But Bill Gates is one of them. Yeah. So now you got 8 people that have as much money as half the planet. Bill Gates is one. Who y'all think is on that list? Oprah did not make the list. No. Jordan didn't make the list. Huh? Mark Zuckerberg made the list. Beyonce did not make the list. Right? So let's think about it. So you got Bill Gates, you got Mark Zuckerberg, the dude who made Amazon, Jeff Bezos, the dude who made Apple. The guy who made Apple, actually, the guy who made Apple passed away. It's another guy. His name is Tim Cook. He's 4. Who else is on that list? Wait a second, y'all. Let's let folks talk. Elon Musk, he almost made the list, but he didn't.
Who's that?
So Elon Musk made a car called a Tesla. Yep. So now we got 4 people. Wait, that's this. Has anybody heard of a person named Carlos Slim?
Yeah.
Alright? Now, Carlos Slim owns all of so if you buy a cell phone in Mexico, Central America, or South America, Carlos Slim controls anywhere from 75 to 80% of all phones sold in that area. Right? So that's Mexico, Central America, and South America. Right? He's one of the richest people on the planet. Warren Buffett, thank you. Do people know who Warren Buffett is?
No.
Warren Buffett founded Geico. So that's Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett founded Geico. He also has a huge real estate company, and he has a large investment company. Now, folks ever heard of a clothing store called Zara? Sometimes some people may have seen it. Now, the CEO for Zara is also on that list. All right?
What about why you made McDonald's?
Say the guy who made McDonald's?
Yeah.
Kroc? No, actually because McDonald's now is corporate owned. So it used to be owned by the Kroc family, but then when he passed away, him and his wife, when they passed away, they sold all their shares back to the corporation.
Why would I get it too much?
Now, here's the thing. There's,
What about Larry Ellison?
Larry Ellison is rich, but he's not on that list. Right? Now, Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Now, there's another place that we all are very familiar with that we use often. Somebody said it. Walmart. The Walmart family. Right? So now, we've named 6 of the 8 people that own, and let's think about this. 6 of the 8 people who own now as much money as half the planet. Now, if we think about this in a different way, the question becomes, and this is a question I have for you all, is 8 people owning as much money as half the world an injustice?
The person who made
Yes, sir.
The person who made Netflix?
Huh? Oh, Netflix is still corporately owned, right? So let's go back to this question. 8 people own half the money in the world. Is that an injustice?
No.
Now, the people who said no, why?
Because they work for it.
Because they work for it. Now, the question is, did they? Ooh.
Not really.
Right? Now, this is a good piece. So, when you say not really, why would you say not really?
Because they didn't actually sit there and do the work. They made other people do it. And they just got money off them.
This is important. Can you please say that again for the group?
They didn't do it themselves. They just made other people do it and got profit off them.
Do people know the story on Facebook?
Yeah.
Do people know what Mark Zuckerberg did?
Yeah.
Right? So and check out this movie called The Social Network. Mark Zuckerberg stole Facebook from 2 of his homies.
He stole it. He did.
Yeah, he stole it from 2 of his homies. And then, to your point, he paid his homies $250 million and then made over $30 billion. So this thing around, so let's put this all in context. Yes, sir.
You can't hate on somebody like they finesse all people, right? You can't hate on them. They rich.
Yes, you can.
You can.
This is an important point. Wait a second, y'all. This is an important point because it's not so much around hating on folks, right? But there's a question here that I think becomes important that you all are posing. In the planet, and this is always the question, does there have to be poor people?
Yeah.
No.
They don't work for it. They gonna
No.
Now let's think about this. This is because now we're asking this question. Now some people are saying no, some people are saying yes. Let's go ahead and come here. Yes, ma'am.
I said, yeah, because if it's not, it's going to be an imbalance. And if you have too many people that are rich or powerful, they don't have anything to control. So there's really no point.
Now this becomes important because now when we're talking about control, and go a little bit further with this, why would people need to control something? Right? So this idea around power, because power allows you to do what?
Whatever.
It's a critically important point. So now, if I'm thirsting for power, so now one of the things that I have to do, I have to ensure that I'm able to maintain power. And one of the ways to maintain power, is an earlier point, is to make sure that you have other people who are actually doing that work for you. Now, the question becomes, are those people paid high wages or low wages?
Low wage.
Now, why would you pay them low wages? Right? So you can maintain money. I want to make sure I get your hand.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, you good? Sure. Because you've raised some important points before, so if you want to jump in on it, please do. All right? So this thing around, so now, this is for your notes, everybody. When we are talking about justice, we are talking about the ability of someone to name, and I'll start again. This is the ability of someone to name an injustice and to work to change the condition. This ability, justice is the ability for someone to name an injustice and then work to change the condition. Right? And when you put social justice to it, what we're talking about is not just at an individual level, but at a group level. Right? So it's to change the condition for larger groups of people. Right? It is a social justice. You're looking for you're seeing these conditions that are not fair, then you're working with others to change what is not right and to make it right. Is that making sense?
Yes.
So now, when we think about Rights to the Streets to Memphis, we're talking about a couple of things, and this is important for you all's notes. The Rights to the Streets to Memphis is a story about trauma. And it is about how someone responds to trauma. Now, we have to go back and think about what was the response of the main character when his mom first sent him out. After he got jumped, he goes back, and then, sorry, go ahead.
Never mind.
Okay. So he comes back, he gets sent to go get groceries, gets jumped, comes back, tells his mom says, don't come back until you get groceries. She gives him a stick. And he responds with what doctors call a fight mechanism. Right? And he is pushed to a certain level.
Isn't that like when your blood pressure, like when your blood pressure
Right.
goes up and then
Yep. So when you talk about, so what happens in that moment, your body fills itself with adrenaline. Now, there's something else that happens with adrenaline. There's something called cortisol.
Can't you pass out?
Let's say again.
Can't you pass out? Does the adrenaline go too high?
Oh yeah. If your adrenaline levels get too high, you experience what folks refer to as a blackout. Right? So now, so his adrenaline levels got high, cortisol levels got high, and then he got agitated, he got triggered to the point, well, what did he do? So when he hit the first person, what did he do afterwards? He hit the rest, but what did he say to them? He was like, come on. They went to go get their parents. He was like, let's get it. Right? Now, here's the thing. If the main character's first traumas were addressed, would he be in that situation? If his first traumas were addressed, would he be in that situation? No. And this becomes important. So naming your first traumas become critically important. They do this, I was telling last period, they do this work with 5-year-olds all the time. What do you all think is one of the most important things for 5-year-olds to do? Just in their day-to-day life. Huh? Somebody said it, eat. It's critically important because if they do not eat, what happens? Right? They don't grow, they experience the trauma. If they don't have water, their body dehydrates. And if they eat the wrong thing, something else happens.
They get fat.
Right? They get sick. Sometimes they get hella agitated. Like when I was a shorty, when I was that little, I was telling last period, my mom got a picture of me just like, ah! Right? And that's how my body worked. I was always like, look, let's run. I was always trying to run someplace. Right? I was trying to get my whole kindergarten class to run out of the playground, but it was a whole different story. But this thing around how we look at those things. So for your notes, now, because Bryce in the Streets of Memphis is a story about trauma, we have to think about what could have addressed his original traumas.
What's the question again?
What could have addressed his original traumas, right? Because his original traumas were what? Hunger. Yep, and his dad leaving. So now, those things around, how do we now think about that? So if he was hungry, and if he was fed, he might not have had to go into that situation.
So
Yep.
it's basically like the willing for him to feel like he don't want to starve no more.
Say it again.
It was basically him feeling like the willingness to not starve no more.
Yep. So it literally, and this is what psychologists and doctors call survival mode. Right? If you are, and this is for your notes, if you are in survival mode, you will do anything or you will go to desperate measures to live. I'll say that again. If you are in survival mode, you will go to desperate measures to live. And that's something that we have not addressed in many cases. And I think I would argue as an older person, if I paid attention to the ways in which people respond or experience trauma, there might be ways for me to address it on the front end. Now, let me stop there. Let me get some of you all's questions that you all wrote in the beginning. What were some of the questions that people had about you?
Why, like, where or why did they do
Right. And that's what's unknown. A lot of times during that time period, a lot of parents had to go and do work outside of the places that they lived. So a lot of times people would have to leave to go work. Sometimes people were in situations that they were being chased by the law and they would leave. Then other times people would be in situations where they actually decided that what they were in at that moment wasn't necessarily the best thing that they felt, and then they would leave. So it's unknown as why he left, but during that time period, that happened a lot in terms of people having to go and work in far places or other situations. But that happened quite a bit. In fact, that actually happened in my family in terms of I had uncles who would work in far away places and then send money back to the family. So that it could have been a number of those things. Let's go with another question. Folks wrote them down, but go ahead.
Why did they change the effect? Why did they change the effect?
Right, in terms of the end. Yeah, why did he change the effect? Because this thing around, remember, Richard Wright, when he wrote it, he he was talking about this right to the street. So this right to the street was something that people felt as if they had to build out, they had to maintain, like they had to get it. So that right to the streets of Memphis is really around how this young person saw themselves getting that right. Right? That's why they didn't change it. Thank y'all again.